Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots. YouTubers, friends, compatriots, compatriots, friends, YouTubers. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And today I want to talk about Ukraine and this very interesting war we have going on there. It still continues to be hard to categorize in some respects, considering the eastern regions technically have broken away and declared themselves autonomous regions, independent countries, no less. And then we have this assault, these repeated assaults put together by the Kiev government against these separatists in those eastern regions. And of course, the most notable thing about the situation unfolding there is the utter hypocrisy of U.S. Foreign policy, as usual, being completely supportive of the Kiev government, essentially using the same tactics that the U.S. condemned so vehemently under the Yanukovych government. No calls for restraint now, and we have Yanukovych never called out the army or the Air Force. So we have fighter planes and missiles and artillery being used in this assault in the eastern regions. And so we have Poroshenko, who was elected in this new election in Ukraine. And of course, the first thing he wants to do right off the bat is show he is different than his predecessor, and that he will solve the problems, and he will show himself to be a strong leader. So he immediately launches this new assault and wants to show he means business. And it's kind of interesting because strategically, it seems like the most effective move would have been to take Ukraine military in force and go in there and occupy. Of course, it has some provocative elements to it, and we would still see the separatists and the resistance that we see now, maybe even more. But the level of this assault so far is certainly not going to turn the tides of this conflict anytime soon. And so we have a slow, simmering separatist insurgency going on in that region now, akin to a guerrilla war. And it gets complicated as well because we have oligarchs in these eastern regions who also have militias and paramilitary groups. And they've actually used some of these groups to clear separatists from certain areas. But now we're seeing separatists consolidate their power in these eastern regions and taking over buildings and key functions and key airports. And so this insurgency seems like it's going to go on for a while, and it's going to probably continue that way for another reason as well, because we have a unreliable police force, we have an unreliable military in Ukraine, and so they can probably only find so many that are willing to go to these eastern regions. I understand that these soldiers only make about $100 a month, and often barely going to work, so they're not very motivated. And then we have all these mixed loyalties, and that's one of the things that gives the separatists some strength as well, because they are now at a point of conviction. They're very motivated. They're well equipped and well trained, because a lot of them are ex-military and ex-police. And so they are the ones who are going to be fighting. And from what we've seen of footage coming out of Ukraine, this seems to be true. And that also explains one of the reasons why the Kiev government has to resort to hiring mercenary forces, which I documented in a previous video, because they need somebody that's going to get the job done, be reliable, and that can actually go toe-to-toe with some of these separatists. And there are also reports coming out that there's a pretty porous border with Russia, and that arms and volunteers are flowing into these separatist regions. That could very well be true. Certainly there's probably Ukrainians and Russians on either side of that border that have an interest in this conflict in this region and are willing to go in there and take care of business. So, as far as Russia is concerned, I don't think that they have any interest really in annexing these regions. It would be bigger headaches than they're worth. Crimea was they could claim as legitimate and legitimately claim, and these other regions, it's just far too controversial. And I think that that's one of the reasons why this is going to play out, and the violence will continue, and there will continue to be this insurgency, and it could end next week, or it could draw on for months and even years, I would imagine, depending on how each side wants to approach it. One of the things I think is actually rather humorous is Putin recently, in a statement, when asked about whether there's Russian troops in Ukraine, uh, 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 was seemed amused and said to prove it. And that's more problematic than a lot of people might realize, to have Russians inside of Ukraine, um, even if they were captured somehow, to separate them from the indigenous population would be very, very difficult indeed. So anyway, here we go in Ukraine. I think ultimately I agree with some pundits that suggest that the only way this is going to end has to be in a diplomatic solution. Somehow these regions are going to have to stay part of Ukraine. I can't imagine, considering the industry focused and the problems of separation, that Ukraine would let those regions go, although they're certainly going to have to adjust with the loss of Crimea, so it's not like there isn't a precedent. So, but ultimately it seems like they're going to be integrated back into Ukraine one way or another, as far as Kiev is concerned. But who knows? We could end up with a couple of new countries in that region, because, as I say, I really don't think Russia will annex those regions. So there we are, where Ukraine is now, a future of a diplomatic solution and a slow-burning insurgency slash civil war slash rebellion going on for weeks, months, or maybe years. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.